What's up everybody? It's Travis here from Travis.media. So here's the context for today's video. You're a WordPress developer, you're doing work on your theme, you're writing code, you're making changes, and when you're done, you push it up to your code repository. So you've made your changes to your theme, you push the code up. At that point, your process is probably like this. You open up the FTP client, something like CyberDuck or FileZilla, or maybe even cPanel, maybe you upload files like that. But it's a manual process. You open that up, you drag and drop your theme files, and you copy them up to your server for the changes to be applied. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty manual process. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can automate that using simple CD or continuous delivery pipelines. And specifically in this video, we're going to be using Bitbucket because it's a popular code repository, but you could use GitHub, you could use Gitlab, Azure DevOps, code commit, whatever you want, they all have pipelines. And what we're going to do is we're going to set it up so that whenever your code is pushed up to master or merged into master, it's going to automatically kick off a build and push your files up to your server and make the changes automatically. Now we're going to be doing this for WordPress sites, but if you watch the video, I'm going to show you some other things you can do with the pipelines, and I'm sure you'll find a way to apply it to your situation. So let's get started. And hey, if you find this video useful, do me a favor and click the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Lots of great videos planned for 2021. Okay, so here's the plan. So we're going to use my Learn to Code Blueprint course staging site as the guinea pig in this video. So we have the staging site, and here in Bitbucket, we have the current code for that staging site. What we want to do by the end of this video is we want to make it so someone's developing on this website, they create a branch, they do a bunch of work, and then they create a pull request to merge that branch into master. What we want is when that code is merged into master, it needs to kick off a build, a pipeline that will take all of those changes and push it via SFTP up to our server, so that every time things are merged to master, our website automatically updates. We don't have to go open up a FTP client and drag and drop and all that stuff. We want to create a pipeline to do this automatically. So to do that in Bitbucket, you go to your repo. I have my repo open here. I'm going to go to repository settings. I'm going to scroll down to settings, and you need to enable Bitbucket pipelines for this repository. So enable pipelines, move that over till it shows a check mark, then go to configure bitbucket pipelines.yaml. And it says, hooray, you've successfully set up pipelines, but you haven't. You haven't set one up yet. I don't know why they do that. But anyway, let's go to our code. So what we want to do is we want to create that bitbucket's pipelines.yaml file. This is going to control our pipeline. So we just need to create a new file called bitbucket-pipelines.yml. And this is where you're going to define your pipeline. Now, if you haven't created a CD pipeline before or a YAML pipeline before, it's pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead and write it first, and then afterwards we can talk about what's going on. And actually, I'm going to pull up here. If you type in like configure Bitbucket pipelines, they have a great web page that you should read through on how to create these things. And they give some great examples on this page. Like you can create your pipeline around branches or tags or pull requests. And here's an example right here we can look at. So here's a pipeline that says, hey, for pull requests, if you have a pull request and that branch has a feature prefix, like feature / whatever, run this script. Otherwise, we're going to run this script. That's for pull requests, any pull requests that happen. You can also do it by branches. You can say, I have a staging branch and maybe a dev branch, maybe, and of course a master. But you could have branches for whatever, and depending on what branch is being committed to, it'll kick off different builds. So yeah, check out this page. It's really good. You can get, pretty deep into it by tags and branches, and here's some advanced stuff where you can do some builds, like right here. You do an npm run build, and then you have your artifacts here. You can like push that to S3, or you can SCP up that to your site. You can do a lot of stuff with these pipelines. But anyway, let's get back to this. I'm going to explain it as I write it. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm just going to paste in my pipeline, and then I'm going to explain to you what's going on. I think that's the easiest way to do it. Let me paste this in. All right, so here's my pipeline. All I'm worried about is the master branch. When something is pushed to master or something is merged into master, I want to kick off this pipeline and push all these new files up to my server. So let's explain this. Quick note here, this image, PHP 7.4, you don't need to pull in this image. It just wasn't removed as I intended. So just ignore this completely in the following video. I got pipelines. We're worried about branches. We're not going to be doing any other fancy stuff. We're going to keep this simple. And I'm only worried about the master branch. So here's my first step, actually my first and only step. I'm going to name it deploy to production. Actually, I'm going to say deploy to staging. Deployment, I'm going to put staging. And I'm going to run a script. This is going to be my script. Now, Bitbucket has this thing called pipe. It's really, really neat. I'm going to take a minute to show you this. Bitbucket pipe. Pipelines, I think it's integrations or something. You can Google this, Bitbucket pipeline integrations, and they have lots and lots of great things you can do here. Watch this. So if you scroll down a little bit, you see all of these categories. And what this pipe is doing is it's grabbing these third-party images. Well, actually, this one's Atlassian, so it's not third-party, but it's grabbing these images that are already put together for you, right? You got these Docker images that do all of these things, connect you to Amazon and Slack and Jira and all these different things. And you just fill in the variables. Hey, here's the variables I want. It'll pull this image, set up the variables, and do the work for you. So Bitbucket has a lot of these. There's a lot with AWS you can do. As far as security, you can do like a get secret scan where it's going to scan all of your code to look for hard-coded sensitive data that you don't want in there. Deployment is really, really good. Lots of good stuff in here. We're actually going to use one from that today. But here's AWS stuff, Azure stuff, Firebase deploy if you want to deploy your code out to Firebase, Google Apps, kubectl. What we're going to be using is actually SFTP deploy, which is copying files to a remote server using SFTP. So we're going to be using this package, and by using pipe, we can grab this image and it'll do all the work for us. But there's also like a Heroku deploy, SCP deploy, so you can copy your files wherever you need. Just to look at a few more here, utilities, workflow automation. So yeah, Jira create issue if you want your pipeline to create issues. Artifact management. So Bitbucket upload file, maybe you're compiling some code and you want to push your artifacts up to Bitbucket somewhere. NPM publish. You can do a Sonar Cloud scan, which detects bugs and vulnerabilities in your code. Pretty cool. You can send a notification to Slack. I was with the job a couple of years ago where every time we pushed a master, we had a pipeline that kicked off and it would send a notification to Slack saying pipeline running so nobody would push or mess with it at all. You can send an email and things like that. Anyway, I just wanted to show you this real quick. There's lots of already kind of pre-set up stuff that you can put in your pipeline. So back to what we were doing. So I'm going to use that pipe, Atlassian SFTP deploy, and there's a couple of variables that we need to use. Now let me pull that one up, SFTP deploy, Atlassian, and I'll show you where I got these from. All right, so here's the source files for that package. I'm going to come down here and it gives you the variables and it gives you a bunch of examples. So here's a basic example. Here's the pipe, your user, your server, your remote path, your local path. If you need a password, here's your password. So that's what I'm going to do. That's where I'm going to start out with this pipeline. So user is going to be, and we're going to define these variables in a minute. So FTP username, this is going to be your FTP username. If it's like you're pulling up CyberDuck or FileZilla or something and FTPing into your site, it's going to be those same credentials. So we're going to create a variable for that so we don't put it in our code. My server is going to be sftp.flywheelsites.com. And the remote path is going to be the path to my WordPress theme. That's all I'm worried about is the theme. So travis.media, learn to code blueprints, staging, /WP content, themes, TM starter. And that's my path for Flywheel. If you're in cPanel, it's probably going to be something like /public_HTML/ your website, whatever that is. But it's your path to your files that you're going to be replacing. And finally, password, my FTP password. I should have put SF. Let's put SFTP. SFTP, username and password. So let's go and define these variables first. So if I come back to my repo here and I go to repository settings, I can come down to repository variables, and I'm going to add them here. So SFTP username. So you can put secured so it doesn't show your value, or you can uncheck that, whatever. I'm going to leave it secured. It's going to be my username, and I'm going to add that. Then I'm going to do SFTP password. I'm going to put my password. And I'm going to add that. So we're good for the variables. So let's click back. Pipelines, and now we're going to push up this pipeline. As soon as we do, it's going to start building because we're going to push it to master. So I think we're good here. And so I'm going to do git add dot git commit, adding bb pipeline, git push, origin master, enter. Now that this is being pushed, you should see it pop up here on pipelines because we just pushed the pipeline YAML file. So that's automatically going to register us for pipelines when things are pushed to master. So here's the pipeline in progress. You can click on it to get more details. So we have the build setup going on. Next, it's going to pull that SFTP deploy image. Here it is, Docker container run. Actually unable to find image, so it's going to pull it. So I tried to run it first, and it couldn't find that image, so it actually pulled the image. And then down here, it says using password, started SFTP deployment, and then host key verification failed. So deployment failed. Why is that? Well, because this is SFTP, not FTP. So SFTP is just like SSH. It requires a key. Same thing with SSH or SCP, anything like that, it requires a key. That's a good thing. And it's really easy to set up here with Bitbucket. So let's go to repository settings, and down here you'll see SSH keys. And what I want to do is I want to basically have a private key here, and then on my Flywheel site, my server, I want to put my public key. And so Bitbucket makes this easy. I can just click generate keys, and it's going to generate me a private and a public key. So I'm going to copy that public key, go back to Flywheel, go to account, which I'm actually already there. Go to SSH, and I'm going to add a new key. Add another SSH key. Give this key a name. Let's call it Bitbucket deploy, and I'm going to paste my public key here and click add key. So I have my public key on my server that I'm sending it to, and I have my private key here on my repo. Now, one other thing you can do down here at known hosts, if you want to add that to your known hosts, you can put in here in the host address, I think it's sftp.flywheelsites.com, and you can click fetch, and it should bring back that host fingerprint. And I can add that to my known hosts. And click add host, boom. So now it's added to my known host. And finally, the last thing I want to do is I want to update my pipeline here to include that key. Now I don't remember exactly what that is. Let's go back to SFTP deploy, look at the documentation, and it is SSH key. And then your key, so SSH_key. Just going to put that down here, SSH key. And where is that key at? Well, I had to do a little digging for this because I don't know the path. I guess I could paste my key in here, but I don't really want to do that. What I ended up doing was I checked this out earlier, and I did a cat, which on Linux lists out stuff in your terminal. I did a cat to the SSH config. So if we go back to let me see, yeah, go back here, and it says, this private key will be added as a default identity in SSH config. So what I did was, I did in this build pipeline, like you can come up here and I can, since it's a script, I can say something like cat SSH config. and I need to pull this in. So you can say cat ssh config. And what that did was it listed out the folder path to that private key. And so I don't know if that's the right thing to do. It worked for me, but there may be another way. Maybe there's a Bitbucket variable or something that handles that better. But I just spit out the path to the private key. And that ended up being this. And I'm going to put single quotes here. Ended up being opt Atlassian pipelines agent SSH ID RSA. That's the path to the key. Again, there might be a better way. Let me know in the comments if so. But this is the way I'm going with. So I've added my private key. It's going to push this up, and it's going to find that public key in Flywheel, and all will be well. So let me try this out. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to push up my changes, and let's see if it works. Actually, I'm going to make a change first, just so we won't have to do this twice. So I'm going to go to the front page. I'm going to find something. So if you look at our page here, and you scroll down, there's this part that says 5 mistakes you're probably making learning to code. So I'm going to change that to like 6 mistakes, just to show you that, hey, it's uploading my files. So here it is, 5 mistakes you're probably making. I'm going to change this to 6. Actually, I'm going to change it to 10 to be a little more drastic. 10 mistakes you're probably making, and save that. So I got 2 changes. I changed my YAML file. So this is going to update. It's going to run the new file or new pipeline. And hopefully it updates our front page if this works. So let's try that. Git add dot git commit. Let's put updating Bitbucket pipeline, git push origin master. All right, so now it should have kicked off another build. So let's go over here and back to pipelines. So settings, actually we got to go back, and pipelines. There should be a build running now. Yeah, updating BB pipeline. Let's click this and see what's going on. So we're currently in the build setup. All right, then it's going to try to run that container. It can't find it, so they're pulling from Bitbucket pipelines, it's pulling the image. And it says using password, and now it says starting SFTP deployment. Permanently adding a host key, good, connected to SFTP Flywheel sites. So it connected fine. It changed to the folder, my TM starter theme folder, and here it is, uploading files. Now, while this is going on, another popular solution is Git FTP. So git/FTP. Let me pull it up here while that's running. Git FTP. This is what I originally wanted to do because I didn't really want to copy all the files every time. I wanted to only copy the files that have changed. It's not a big deal because you don't run this all the time, but I wanted to use this. This is really popular too, and it's really easy to set up. It's FTP, but if you look at the documentation, you're supposed to be able to use SFTP pretty easily. So I'm going to come down here and it says, you're less likely to face connection problems with SFTP, and you're supposed to just be able to do this git FTP init, username, your private key, and the repo. You're supposed to be, but I tried like 100 things and it just didn't work. I tried the password, I tried the private key, fixed all the key, and I did a bunch of things that wouldn't work. The only way it'll work is with this insecure flag. So there's this, I don't know if they have this listed here, but there's this -- insecure right here. So what that does is it makes it so you don't verify servers' certificates. And to be honest, an insecure SFTP is way better than FTP. You're not verifying the server certificate, but it is secure. It is encrypted. Like that's the main thing, it's encrypted. But I still don't like running this insecure. I mean, it works for your own hobby stuff, but when you get into doing production stuff for clients, you don't want to be putting in an insecure flag. So I totally ditched this, and I'm going with Atlassian's SFTP deploy, which works great. So let's go back to that. All right, it's still uploading files. And it's done, actually. Yeah, deployment finished. So if you go back to pipelines, you'll see that the second one ran fine. It says successful. It took 2 minutes and 30 seconds to run. Not bad. And if I go back to my site and it says 5 mistakes, let's update this page and see if it says 6 or 10. Yeah, 10 mistakes you're probably making in learning to code. So what we did there, and actually, let me do one more thing just to give you the full picture. Let's go back here. Let's make the change back to 5. So instead of 10 mistakes, let's change it to 5 mistakes. And what I want to do is I want to do git checkout B. Let's check out another branch because this is how you're really supposed to be doing it in production. So let's check out a branch. How about feature slash update homepage? Let's check out a branch called that. And let's say we're working on the branch. We make a couple of changes, do some things to it, which we only really changed this number. But so we're done. Let's do git add and then git commit. Updating, I don't know, it could be whatever. So I'm going to hit return and git push origin feature update homepage. So I'm going to push this to a new branch in Bitbucket. And this is kind of how you do it. You've been working on this other branch, you've been doing all this stuff, and then you're going to push your branch up, and then somebody's going to take that branch, review it, and then merge it into master. And when they do that, and only when they do that, should it push those new files up to your server. So let's go back here. And we should be able now to go to pull requests and create a new pull request. And it's going to be from that branch, that code from the branch we just pushed, so feature slash update homepage. We're going to go from that branch and merge it into master. So I'm going to say merging homepage changes. And actually, if we go back to the repo, let me show you something before that. We just need to make sure that that pipeline didn't fire when we pushed up code to another branch other than master. All right, so yeah, it did not create a new pipeline, see 5 minutes ago. But once we merge this into master, it should, because it's going to master, push our new code up to our server. And we want that to happen when we go to master, right? Because we've made our changes, people have signed off that, hey, this looks good. And actually, you're probably going to want to have a more in-depth, staging site, maybe a dev site where people can check out the changes. And that's when you make your pipeline a little more complicated. So instead of saying master only, you want to make a script for dev and a script for staging, and then finally to master. But for simplicity's sake, we're going to leave it like this. I do want to delete that branch when we're done. And I don't need a description. So so we just create pull requests. Okay, so here's my pull request. I made the change from 10 back to 5. So let's say Mr. Senior Developer comes in here, he approves it. Yeah, that looks good. And he clicks merge. Now, when he clicks merge, it's going to merge this branch into master and fire off that pipeline. So let's click merge, close source branch, good. Merge that commit. And let's go over to our pipeline, and it should be a new one starting up. There it is, in progress. So what's happening here is everything was good. Let's push those changes up to our staging site or production site or whatever you've defined in your YAML. All right, so again, the same thing again. We did the build. We're pulling this SFTP deploy image, and we're going to start pushing all of our files. And while that's going, since we built this pipeline, this may make more sense to you now, all of these different nice things you can do here. So be sure to check out this page, and you'll realize how easy it is. But the main thing is that you want to define how you want to do it before you create the template, right? So if you do have a dev branch and a staging branch or environments, a dev and a staging environment, a production environment, then you do want a build pipeline for each one. So people may create branches and then merge them into dev. You want it to build for your dev site. And then from there, you can take that and build it into your staging or something like that. It just depends on your setup. But let's go back and make sure this did fine. And you can do your whole CI/CD here in Bitbucket because you can push your code and have it run tests or check for vulnerabilities, things like that. You can compile your code, do things with artifacts. When all that's done, you can deploy it out to your server. It's really great and very easy to set up in Bitbucket. All right, so it looks like we're done. Here, see how it's green and has a check mark. Go back to pipelines. I should have a third build that's successful. And if I go back to my site, I should be able to refresh and have it set back to 5. Boom, there it is. So This is a great way to not have to manually FTP or SFTP all of your files out to your server every time you push to master or merge into master. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to know more about Bitbucket pipelines, or you want me to do pipelines or any CI/CD stuff in other environments like AWS, GitLab, something like that, let me know down in the comments. And if this video was helpful, click that like button, and I'll see you in the next video.